I think Israel has only itself to blame. I think the force used has been so grossly disproportionate. They have inflicted civilian casualties in a way that the United States and the UN Secretary General are correct to call appalling. You don't use tank shells if you're trying to make a precision strike. I've covered war for over 40 years. If you want to use a Hellfire missile directed by a drone, you can put it in a window of a building that you want to. When you're using a tank shell, in this case, the firing that they were receiving was 200 yards, 2 football fields away from where those tank shells landed, taking these 10 lives. This is a travesty. It is hurting Israel on the world stage. It is undermining support of the Jewish state. I think it's
hold on a second, though. I mean, they've obeyed humanitarian windows. They have warned civilians. I mean, they have done a lot to make sure that civilians in Gaza have been protected. If you have firing coming from a school or from a location and Israel fires back on the people who are firing them, are we really holding Israel accountable for that? Are we saying this is your fault, you can't defend yourself?
You remember when Bloomberg went over and said the airport is safe, open the airport, it's ridiculous to overreact and close the airport. We've got these missiles, we've got them wiped out with the Iron Dome and so forth. 3 Israeli civilians have been killed in the current round. One was an Arab farmer, just by random. The other 2 were somehow engaged with the military. 60 IDF soldiers, over 1,800 Palestinians, most of them women and children. Come on, Jedediah.
But stop firing rockets then. Stop firing rockets into Israel.
Now things have changed, though, in the 40 years that you've seen these wars.
What has changed?
Okay, so it used to be that Israel could fire, and in 3 to 6 days, because they've been called the 3-day war, the 6-day war, they could do things. But there's asymmetrical warfare that these terrorists are getting their hands on now, and this is making it tougher to root them out. So now it becomes a month-long conflict. Now it becomes an unending conflict. And you are going to, as Jedediah says, you are going to have to hit certain targets that you pray you don't have to, because they are positioning themselves with these new weapons that reach farther into Israel.
What are kids doing in schools in the first place in a war? What are they doing in school?
These are safe houses
let me finish,
set up by the United Nations.
Geraldo, let me please speak. They put these kids in a school. They put weapons deliberately in a school. Then Israel strikes, and people like you get up and defend a terrorist
What is a person like me, first of all? What is a person like me?
It's an apologist for a terrorist organization.
You should be ashamed of yourself for saying that to me, of all people. There's a Jewish star tattooed on my hand. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist. I would die for Israel. This is appalling. This is appalling. Whose side we are when there are 1,800 dead civilians and women and children are bleeding on camera, and you are not moved by that?
Whose fault is that?
Whose
fault?
They
warned them to move the kids.
These Palestinian missiles are absolutely laughable in their military effect. Israel now is about to declare a unilateral ceasefire. It could have declared it 2 weeks ago.
Unbelievable to defend.
It is Israel is alone in the world.
Geraldo, let me ask you this.
And attitudes like yours will make it isolated more and more.